Okay, so Mr. Alexis Poulin is from France. He's an expert in French and European policy. And he's very well known in France, especially with his press reviews on Le Monde, Moderne, a channel available on several social media. He's also regularly appearing on TV programs on politics and society. And because he speaks English, and I think it was important to do a space in English so people hear from a French person what is going on in France. And it's unfortunately not that common these days on social media. I remember the time when of Professor Raoult, who was speaking in French to French media, and nobody essentially knew what was going on in the world with him because of the language barrier. So let's basically tackle this language barrier for kind of a North American, British, English-speaking audience globally. And in terms of his credentials, Mr. Poulin has degrees in political sciences and European affairs, and he has worked for several public institutions and corporations as a consultant, international consultant. This is an interview of him, but let me mention that I'm personally an engineer, but also an economist, and I have some, let's say, tools to a bit analyze what is happening in France and what are the implications also of what is going on from an economic perspective. So we'll have about an hour together, and it will be mostly an interview. But hopefully we'll have a bit of time for questions. But I really want to pack as much material as we can in 1 hour, so we don't spend the whole Sunday on this and your whole Sunday. And what is important to me are the facts, because it's very hard to find. The social media, everybody is a journalist or whatever, but the facts are hard to get, And so I want the facts, and I want also elements of solutions, short-term and more kind of medium-term. But we need to discuss that. That is the topic. And, of course, both of us, we are totally opposed to violence, and we don't have a particular political agenda in doing this. We just want to inform. Because what is happening right now in France may happen in other countries. But at the same time, one needs to be very careful. For example, personally, I'm from Belgium, and I was checking, I was hearing, there is something happening in Belgium. And then when I checked, it was, I think, 31 minors who got arrested and 4 adults for one event that took place in central Brussels. But it was not at all what I perceived when I first heard about the news on Twitter. So one has to be very careful, put things in perspective. So we are going to discuss that too. And we need also to think about the European context of Germany going into recession, in recession right now, several other countries, France not yet, but it may happen. Energy crisis, economic crisis. So things may get worse. And so these kind of events may replicate themselves if the causes are really socioeconomic, as it seems they are to a significant extent. And so this will be the context outline for this interview. And let's jump into the first part, which are the facts. So, Mr. Poulin, can you summarize what happened, especially over the past 5 days in France? What triggered the situation, and who was involved, and where did it take place, particularly in France?
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me on this space. What happened? It was on Wednesday. A young French boy called Naël was killed by a policeman during a road control. He was driving a Mercedes car, and he was stopping, but he put on a gear and went on, and the police officer shoot at point blank and killed him. Since then, there's been riots all over France. It happened in Nanterre, which is in the suburbs of Paris. The day after the death of this young boy Naël, there was a march in his memory in Nanterre, and it didn't so well at the end of the march. And during the night, there have been riots in Nanterre, in other Parisian suburbs, but also in other cities of France, like south of France, Marseille, but also in the north, Maubeuge, Lille, Besançon, Dijon, all kind of cities, small, medium, and big cities in France. We've seen people in the streets, burning cars, burning schools, trying to loot shops, and fighting with the police forces using fireworks. And also some have been using guns. So it's been very fierce. It's been very violent. On day one, the police presence was not so important, but as of Thursday, Gérald Darmanin, the Minister of the Interior, decided to put more forces, 45,000 police officers in the street of France, curfew in over 30 cities, the interdiction of tramways and buses to navigate from 9 p.m., and also drones, helicopters, armored vehicles, and special units like Red BRI, which are normally used to fight terrorist attack. So we are in this situation where it's very violent. There is a lot of misunderstanding about what are the rioters really about, because it's not normal about Naël memory. At the beginning, it was to protest with the death of the teenager, but it went on to something bigger, a sort of a general protest about the state of France, and looting, of course, because a lot of the rioters are here only to get in the shops, burn the shops, get anything that is in there, and fight the state and its representative, being the police officers. So that's where we stand. There has been more announcement made by the Minister of Interior and the special interministerial committee, saying that the social network will be monitored and censored. The government, the French government, have been asking the responsible of TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook to moderate any content that is showing violence, the riots itself. And we had a sort of blackout or a pan, something that didn't work in French social network, especially Twitter, where it's very difficult now to get information or images or videos of what happened. And even if the Minister of Interior was very happy about last night, saying that it was less violent than the night before, last night there was a police officer that get a gunshot. He's not dead, but he is injured. And there was a mayor whose private house has been attacked by a vehicle that was set on fire, and his wife is in hospital, and his kid also had some issues. So it's really going all over the place. It's really violent. And since the social network have been censored, it's very difficult to know really what's going on, apart from the different declaration from the minister and the préfet and other responsible.
And do we know who is involved, and is this kind of organized? Is it coordinated?
Yeah, well, that's what the Minister of Interior says, that these rioters are coordinating themselves on Snapchat, for example, to tell where to gather and to loot the shops. But you can't really say that it's organized or coordinated. There has been a sort of a branch of the far left trying to help and support these rioters and try to understand where they want to go. But from what I can see, there is a mix of political demand, of also a big shout and fed up about racism in French police, about violence in French police, about violence of the state. And also, we are in France in a dire economic situation where inflation is very high, where unemployment is high, and where, if you look at the figures, the people living in the suburbs, in the territories where the drama happened and where they are actually rioting, they are more unemployed than the rest of the population, and they don't have the same kind of level of niveau de vie as the rest of the population. So it's something that is mixed between the minorities, between racism, between hate about the French state, and between the, of course, neo-Marxism, lutte des classes, the class war, because of those who have not, as said Macron in a speech when he was in campaign for the first time.
From what I saw and also read, but this is only partial information, as I mentioned, there was an indication there were many young people, many minors under the age of 18. Can you confirm that, or what kind of information is available? Because these are teenagers, essentially, if that is the case.
I think the average was 17-year-olds. That was said by President Macron in one of the Security Council that he had on Friday morning, I think. But it's mixed. I mean, it's from 11-year-old to much more, and you can even see some parents trying to loot the shops to get some food, to get some products. So it's going all over the place, really, and but mainly you can say that fighting with the police are the younger, the most younger rioters, and looting the shop as well. With the video I've seen, you can see that they are young boys mainly, and not so much girls. Some of them are filming, but it's the kind of people seen. I think there has been about 2,000 arrests or something like that in the past days, and Justice Department is trying to judge on the spot the rioters to make sure they get a judgment immediately on what happened during the night.
I heard you saying in one interview recently, recent program you did, that essentially the prisons are full in France.
Yeah.
So what are they going to do with these 2,000 people?
Fined. I think that they will get fined. They might also want to fine the parents if the people arrested are minors. Putting them in jails, I think, is not an option. It will, if it's an option, it's going to be difficult because yes, already French prison are overcrowded. So I don't know where they will put these new people coming, and for how long as well. So it's. I mean, it tells a lot about the state of France, both about the use of the police forces and the state of the Justice Department, which is lacking money, of course, lacking funds. There has been a lot of demand from the unions in the health sector, but also in the justice sector. Everywhere, what we see is that our public services are not working so well in France, despite the fact that we are a country where tax is very high.
And have you heard interviews on Twitter or Telegram or elsewhere of rioters, expressing what they were asking, even if they were hiding their face? Is there any kind of information we get about what do they have typically on their mind for participating in these riots?
I think it's the sort of anger about the French state and the French police in general, because in this suburbs or in these territories, there has been a long story of fight between police and these youngsters. Back in 2005, for example, there was some riots in November, October, November, because of the death of two young teenagers that were trying to escape police control, and they die being electrified because they went in the wrong place. And it lasted for 3 weeks, and it was less violent than what we've seen, but it was very violent at the time. It was also a surprise. And since then, there has been some policies about the suburbs and how you try to get some money for the buildings, for Mediatek, for trying to have schools and all sorts of public infrastructure. But it of course work to a certain margin, but we are at the same place. And it's interesting to see that these Rioters are attacking their own infrastructure, the schools, the bibliothèque, the libraries, the town halls, anything that is in the vicinity, and even police stations. So it's really something about a reject of the French state, or an anger that is going well above being frustrated about the state of the public services. It's something that is deeply rooted about how the French authorities are dealing with these territories, with the police control, with the traffic, with the way these people coming from immigration background are treated by the French police. Nothing new, but the amount, I think, of violence tells a lot about the fact that the policies so far have been a failure.
And these are high unemployment areas. Typically.
Of course, higher than the rest of the territory, and a lot of parallel economy as well. If you look at Marseille, for example, the city where the riots were the most violent, there is a lot of drug traffic and of violence because of the drug traffic. In normal times, there has been shooting with weapons in the streets, and young people being killed between gangs because of the drug traffic. So the parallel economy is high, and make living for a lot of the people living there, or the youngster living there, and on the other side, trying to find a job, getting integration can be difficult because of a sort of racism, the lack of diploma and everything, and the fact that there is not so many jobs in France, or attractivity in this job when you can make a lot of money just by drug dealing. So the problem is there. It's been there for years. It's just coming to a point where politicians can't pretend it doesn't exist, and can't pretend the policy they had or they choose in the past years have been working, full stop. And Jean-Louis Borloo was a minister of la Ville, minister of cities, made a report at the beginning of the first mandate of Emmanuel Macron on the suburbs, and this report basically was buried and it was never discussed. Emmanuel Macron didn't want to address the issue of the suburbs. So again, same problems, same issues like in 2005, like even before. Only now do we have more young people with a sort of nihilist background that are ready to fight and really to be very violent against the French police and against everything that is around them.
I was listening to a Twitter space and in French, and there were business owners who were essentially saying they were going to kind of organize themselves to defend themselves against the looting. And I'd like to mention that for people who are not familiar with Paris, there are many small businesses, sometimes a bit luxury businesses, but still small businesses. It's not like the empire of the mall, of the shopping mall. And so these people can lose everything if they get looted, because they have all this stock of products, and then they are in a disastrous situation. And these are small businesses are the source of employment of many, many people in economies like France. So what is going to be the reaction of this kind of middle-class small business owners to this situation if the looting continues?
There always been some reaction of people trying to protect their businesses at night, or trying to make sure that there won't be some more looting. Of course, small businesses are huge for employment in France and in Europe. I think it's 99% of employment all over the place, SMEs and other entrepreneurs. And the fact that anything goes. I mean, it's been restaurants, it's been shops. It tells a lot. Even hairdresser, whatever that was possible was burned or destroyed. So there will be, of course, anger. There will be the need of protection. The question about what would be the answer of the French state, and the Minister of Economy, Bruno Le Maire, just said that, well, you should contact your insurer, and we'll make sure that you don't have to pay taxes soon, and we'll be kind so that you can build again and start. But for some people, it would be impossible to start again because of the cost, because insurer might be difficult to get and to get on board, and also not only businesses but people in these suburbs that are not rioters are impacted by these violences. For example, if you had a car and you need a car to go to work, and it's been burned during the night, then you have an issue, because you can't take public transportation. It's stopped at 9, and it's not easy, because also there has been some violence on buses and trams, and your car is burned, and basically you have to call your employer and say, I can't come to work today because my car is dead, and not because of me, but because of what happened during the night. So all kind of difficulties will arise from these violences, and of course there will be a different way of looking at people, at security, at how we can live together. You know, we got this expression in France called le vivre ensemble, which is living together. How le vivre ensemble can work after a situation where a part of the population is ready to burn everything down, and not just for political reason, but also just for economical reasons, saying, I'll take it, it's for myself, and I burn it because it's not my property, so I don't care about property, private, be it public or private, and I burn it. There is a big issue there about how we build a society together, what are the values, how we share them, but it comes also because of the violence of this society, where you need to earn money to consume and to make sure you can have a living. And the problem was back in 2018, for example, with the Yellow Vest movement, where the middle class were in the street because they couldn't earn a living, even with a job, saying that it was getting too difficult to buy a home, even to rent a place, to buy food, to make sure that you had a future for your kids. And this, back in 2018, was a problem. And if you look now, it's even more a problem. The price of the housing, the price of the food, the price of everything, basically. Inflation is also part, I think, of the trigger of what happened, because it's getting impossible, basically, to earn a living in France right now because of the state of the economy and the inflation.
So this is also very different. You mentioned the yellow jackets, les gilets jaunes, but you had also the demonstration very recently, the demonstrations against the increase in the retirement age. So these are, at least the protests today are pretty different from those that just occurred a few months ago with these new retirement age. Correct, huh?
Yeah, the protests we had for the retirement reform, the pension reform, were totally organized by the unions. So it was very well organized. There was some security measures, and it was protests that were set up with the authorities, so that the police forces were around and knew where they were going. There has been some violence also because of the police component, because there is a lot of violence with the use of police forces by Emmanuel Macron and his government. So it was already violent, but it was not the same as what we've seen. The riots we are seeing now, they are nothing to do with the unions, nothing to do with any party, political party or whatever. It's really coming from the people in this part of France that are fed up with police violence, with the violence of the state, and with the fact that they don't have a chance compared to other French citizens. So it's completely different. Even the violence is different. The looting, the use of fire, and the fact that the police is trying to avoid another death, because that would be the end of everything. So you can see that the police people are trying to work around the Rioters, but they don't use the violence as they used to during the pension reform, for example, protest, or during the Yellow Vest protest, where it was very, very violent. The fear is there that there could be another death, or and that would just trigger a proper revolution this time.
So are there police unions that have made statements about the situation? I think so.
Yes, some police unions made very violent statements saying that there should be a civil war, basically, and they should use the force and shoot to kill kind of declaration. And this union was condemned by the French Minister of Interior, saying that it was not words that could be in the mouths of police people. Other unions are saying that the violence is terrible and they've never seen that in their existence, and that the orders are not clear, and that they basically what they see on the ground is mayhem, and it's not clear what the executive of the French government wants, and what they want of the police forces. So there's a lot of discontentment as well in the police people. There's a lot of people leaving the profession, around 10,000, 15,000 a year, both gendarmerie and police nationale. Basically, people are just stopping being cops. They're just leaving this job because it's too dangerous, too violent, and there is a lot of a rate of suicides in this profession that is very high compared to other professions. So there is also a problem within the police, both in terms of the quality of the workplace, the commandment, and the violence that is being a cop in France right now.
Not sure you can respond to this, but there was kind of an allusion, and I have no clue if there is a foundation to this, that some people in the army expressed some concern about the situation.
Yes, some said that basically this kind of mayhem agenda would serve the power to basically push an agenda of a special regime like we had for COVID. Basically, état d'urgence, emergency state, and things like that. And they said it's not very intelligent to do that. But no one in the army wants to jump in. It's not the role of the army to maintain the public order, and some people are calling for the army to jump in, but I think they don't know what it means, and the army is not willing to do this job because it's not its job, basically.
So one video that many people saw was Elton John's concert, and the president attending. Is he out of touch? What has been the reaction of the president as essentially the first person of the country?
Yeah, on the first night of riots, Emmanuel Macron and his wife were at the concert of Elton John in Paris, and they were very happy about that. But it's not the first time that Emmanuel Macron is completely out of touch. On Tuesday, he went in Brussels to have a meeting with all other head of state, but also meet his own party to prepare for the European election. He doesn't care about the state of France. I think it's very, very worrying to see a president that is so far away from what's really happening, what is boiling under the surface. There is a disconnection that is very high. It's always been, I mean, with the president, but with Emmanuel Macron, it's kind of back to the old regime with, you know, the king and the pleb and the people from the from below, where he doesn't understand this country. He doesn't understand the French people. He was in Marseille on Monday for 3 days to pretend that his policy were great for the city, and that he went in a suburb that was burning on Friday night and that was burning on Tuesday, just to tell you the amount of propaganda that we have in France to pretend that he's a good president, that he knows what he's doing, and that he's got the good policies. Basically, what happens is when there is an issue, it comes, there is lots of camera from the mainstream media, the film, and he's just a setup, and he's talking to people that are basically here because they have been chosen, and then he goes off in an helicopter plane with a lot of cops around him to protect him, but there is something very wrong in France right now with this president and the way he used power and he used violence as well. And I think we've seen it with also the way he decided to manage these riots, by not declaring emergency of state, but using some kind of thing like curfews, like special forces, but not saying that it's emergency of state, because that would say a lot about the failure that he is and that his policy are. So I'm very worried about where we're going because of the censorship of social network, because of the propaganda, and because of this disconnection of the rulers with the people of France that are way out and not talking to each other in a correct manner, that what it would be in a functional democracy.
Declaring a state of emergency, what would that mean in the context of France?
Well, that would mean we're back in COVID. So that would mean curfew. That would mean that you couldn't actually use social network or the internet. That would mean that we are no more in a liberal democracy. And the question arises during COVID because we had, the pass, the green pass. We had also the cops that were looking if you had the right to go out of your place. So it was already, a big test about the compliance of the French people, about the use of police forces, not to protect, but to impose a curfew and to limit the movement and the freedom of people. And right now, what I see is that the agenda is fierce on attacking public freedoms, attacking our freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of union, freedom of public movement like les Soulèvements de la Terre, which is an ecological movement, has been also cancelled and attacked by the government. It's very worrying what is happening right now. And I think we are moving from a liberal democracy that was not very functioning to a totally illiberal regime. And this with the help of mainstream media, not alerting the French people of what is happening here, because it's not about security, it's not about protecting the people, it's about censorship, and it's about making sure that your public freedom are basically limited to nothing.
Can you outline briefly the political landscape in France? What are the other parties and how do they stand vis-à-vis this crisis?
Okay, so you have the party of Emmanuel Macron called Renaissance, which is a center-right party, but very weird because the idea, I think, is to have a unique party like the Communist Party in China, for example. So the ruling party would be him and his small satellites, and the right, les Républicains, who are very close to the ideas of Emmanuel Macron and to his policy, pension reform, for example, but also security, immigration, all that kind of thing, basically. And these two could merge into the central, unique party. You have then the far right, Rassemblement National, with Marine Le Pen. Same again, she's okay with security measures, immigration and stuff like that, but she wants to go further. And basically, she Party is the main opposition for a lot of people in France and for the media presenting her as the main opposition. And then you have NUPES, which is the left, sort of center left to the far left, plus the ecological people, the Grünen, the Green, and they are not agreeing with each other. It's very difficult, and they are not moving in the same direction because of election, European election, but also the election for cities and such and such. So if you look at the political landscape, it's looking like a suburb of France after a night of riots. There is a lot of smoke, and it's all destroyed, and people are trying to see where to go and what's left. And we're going to a sort of a central, unique party that would be ruling the order, and the other party that would be contesting this order, being left or right. But it's something that is happening right now, and pushing by the personality also of Emmanuel Macron.
So we are far away from the previous landscape, which was kind of a socialist party and then more kind of Republican party. And
yeah. All that has been totally destroyed by the Renaissance, the kind of central, unique party that Macron had in mind. Yes.
But what is the proportion of the population that voted for that party?
Well, not so much, but it worked. So they had they don't have the majority in the chamber, for example, but Emmanuel Macron was elected because he was in front of Marine Le Pen. So a lot of French people decided to vote for him to avoid having Marine Le Pen in power. But basically, I don't think it was the right choice. But it happened this way, and he didn't have a majority in the chamber. So that's why the pension reform basically were not voted by the member of the parliament because it was 49-3. It's a trick with the Fifth Republic that make possible for government to push a law, a text without voting, just saying you vote for a censor of the government or we pass the law, and that's where the Républicain, the right party, kind of work together with this centrist party of Emmanuel Macron.
And currently, these opposition parties, what are they asking the government to do? What are they recommending?
It depends. On the left side, the parties are asking for more control on the police forces, more freedom, of course, and less violence, and also a new kind of a social deal. On the right side, people are asking for more violence, more forces of police, more state rules, more censorship. So it's really reflecting the state of the public debate, which is in disarray. It's very caricatural. It's very, I mean, there is no debate because either you agree with Emmanuel Macron or you are someone dangerous for the Republic. That's where we stand now. So it can't work. I mean, it's not a functioning democracy if you don't have freedom of speech and if you can't say that you disagree and you can vote in the parliament about laws that are impacting every French citizen. So we are in this kind of mock-up of democracy where people stand and play their roles to a certain extent, but where it doesn't work because of the Fifth Republic, because it can give so much power to a single man, and that's where we stand right now.
And what would be your message to the president in terms of communications? What does he need to do, from your perspective, to appease the situation, to get people ultimately off the street and off these riots, etc.?
I think it's down to his personality. I think right now, if we want to recover a peaceful country, he would have to leave and call for new elections. I think that would be the only option for peace. What he will do, he will use police violence, he will use more forces to enforce his power and to stay in power. And he will use propaganda and censorship to stay in power. So that's why I'm very worried, because I've seen this during COVID and I see it again. And I don't think it's an option. I think we should have at least a new call for election for the parliament, for example, a new government, minimum. But since the way he treats politics with a certain disdain, the way he uses little words to humiliate some French people, some part of the French population, a president shouldn't be doing this. A president should kind of be the main referee and try to make sure that we have a democracy and we don't have violence. I don't say that he's responsible for all the violence, but he's responsible for the use of violence during the Yellow Vest, during the protest for the reform, and the fact that he's never coming back to his own violence and the use of force. He's always condemning violence of the rioters, of the protester, but never his own violence. And I think that's where justice is inexistent in France, because you can't say that some people are violent and the other are not, because they are actually. And that's where we stand. So there's no option. He will not leave, of course. So it will be a sort of a run until when, I don't know, until there is a further death and violence, if it stay like that. I think French people are fed up, honestly. Our country has been burning since 2018 every weekend, if not every week, if not every day. To a point, I mean, you can't have a thriving economy, you can't have happy people if your country is in this state of violence and I mean, we need basically appeasement. We need peace, and we need a break from these very shocking policies of unstoppable reform that are only here to make sure we can pay the debt.
So to clarify, he has been re-elected a year ago, and he has another 4 years for his current term and last term. Also, so this is not very encouraging. But he could change ministers, because in France, I think it's important for a U.S. audience to understand the president has very, very big responsibilities, and the role of the prime minister is much more like to implement rather than set policy. So the only way for him is to completely change his cabinet and maybe make alliances with other parties. Is there anything possible of that nature, or is it something that it is just not part of the tradition in France?
I think that's exactly what will happen. He would ask for a sort of a government of national union around him, with people from the right side and some people from civil society, and saying, we need to, build a new pact and stuff like that. But nothing will change. I mean, we had that with Sarkozy before, why would it change? The only question is, can it last 4 years? The answer is presently no. So something has to change.
And now, something that is real is that there is this influence of the World Economic Forum, and you see the will of the people may not be the same as the will of the World Economic Forum, and we know that Macron has been very much involved into that organization, at least. So how do you see it evolving? Because it looks like what needs to be done to appease the situation and go back to quote unquote normal is contrary to going towards whatever new normal is ahead for us.
Well, you see, you're right to mention the WEF and the fact that young leaders are everywhere in the place, and that country where they are in the place are not in a good shape. The fact is that, for example, on Friday or on Thursday, he talked about fires and like fires in Canada with Justin Trudeau, saying that France could help to stop the fire in Canada, while the riots were burning in the night before. So clearly, the global agenda is well above the national agenda. Actually, the national agenda doesn't exist no more. For Macron, everything is European, and he works with von der Leyen that he helped being in power. He imposed the name of Ursula von der Leyen at the head of the commission, for example, and everything is global, because it's easy to talk about carbon, to talk about climate change. It's easy to talk about Ukraine and say we need to help Ukraine and have this war go on forever. It's easy to just pretend that you act when you're actually just burning some money, burning some cash on just new lobby. Carbon, of course, is there, but the 2030 agenda is about limitation of freedom again. So if you look at what it's doing, the different laws that has been passed in the past years and that are in the making, it's all about limiting public freedom. Make sure that you'll get your pass, make sure that you'll get your carbon pass, make sure you get data on you and who you are, make sure that, you know, nation doesn't exist no more, and that we are part of a big thing that is a common market, let's say. And of course you can buy, but you need to pay your tax, and you need to obey, and you need to be not free, but you need to be a good citizen, you know, the social credit inspired from the Chinese party. So it's not being a conspiracy theorist saying that. It's just really clear. If you look at what they're talking about, if you look at Ursula von der Leyen, either she talks about Ukraine or about carbon, and we know that she ordered another 2035 million doses of a future vaccine with Pfizer. So it's all about the same plan. It's all about the same kind of situation where we are treated like lab rats, basically. And it's there. It's pregnant in the way they treat people, in the way they see that, you know, policy is not something that they understand. They work with McKinsey, they work with all the consulting firm. They will be working with BlackRock in terms of trying to help finance to stay well and make sure that they'll make money out of nothing, out of destruction. If you look at JP Morgan, if you look at the state of the economy right now, the dollar, it's shambolic, but they pretend it's okay. And it works because basically we are in a state of terror. We are in a state of shock, basically. We don't understand what's going on. And it can work because of propaganda and censorship. And it's very high on the European agenda, very high on the French agenda right now. And that's why I want to stress and make sure that we are all together in this to protect our freedom, because that is the main fight that we have to fight in the coming months and years.
I was on a large Twitter space yesterday. I think you were there, and it seemed that the recurrent explanation, single, one-sided explanation was immigration being the problem of everything. So we stop immigration, or we even send back some migrants to their home or whatever. That will solve everything. Don't you have a feeling that there is a tendency politically to simplify things for pure political advantage?
It's always been the case. I mean, you have to simplify, and the debate is getting into a caricature of a debate. With immigration, it's been there for years, but it's been also there in denial, saying that, you know, what the EU is bringing us, open borders, okay, for what? For moving there and there, but COVID came and we couldn't move. Okay, but we still have the immigration process where we can't actually manage the borders. If you look at the policy we had, we are former colonial empire, so we've been stealing the resource, we've been killing the people in Africa. and in Northern Africa, and that's what made us rich to a certain extent. And now, of course, there is resentment, and of course, people are coming to our countries because you can have a job, you can send money back in your country, and you can try to make sure you have a future and situation. And the more obscene thing about this is that in the mouth of Emmanuel Macron and any rulers, they would say that our country needs to be attractive for global companies, for banks, for investors. But if your country is attractive for these people, of course it is attractive for people who just want a job, for people who come from a country where there is no job, where there is war, where there is hunger, where basically you're attractive to anyone, not just the rich people that you know and that you have dinner with every other night. So the issue is there, how you can pretend to be attractive to investor and then say to people who want to come and work in your country that they can come. And so far, the policies have been totally hypocrite, and they pretend that we manage to have people coming and then have their job and stuff. But if you come in Paris, go in the streets, especially in the north of Paris, you would see villages of tents of migrants, people that are here, that have no jobs, that are in the streets and are waiting for their papers to be processed. And even when their paper are processed and basically they can stay in our country, les OQTF, so it's a paper that says you can't stay no more in France and you have to leave, it's ineffective in most of the cases. So we are in a position again where it's the dismissal of the political people. They haven't been working for years. They have been pretending to work. They have been pretending to find solution when it was just money and communication. And communication, it doesn't work anymore. That's why we come to censorship and propaganda, because we can't communicate anymore. We have to be in a place where the information, the facts have to be totally erased of the public debate. And it's populism. You can call it what you want, but Macron is a populist as well, a populist of the elite, as I call him. So we are in a situation where it's very difficult to get out. It's clearly impossible unless we have real politicians that will do politics. Referendums, for example. Ask the French people what they want about immigration. Ask the French people what they want about pension reforms. It's time to get back to a democracy where it's actually the people who have a say and not the consulting firms.
And in terms of maybe a last question before we move to questions from the audience, a kind of a recurrent problem years after years, decade after decade, is the unemployment of the youth. From your experience, have you seen in France kind of successful recipes to create, to have jobs for young people? Because this seems to be a major element to address the medium-term situation, from my perspective. But is the taxation regulatory system so flawed that it's just impossible to recruit people without, or are there positive experience that you can mention of people having created employment, etc.? You see,
I think, as you said, it's small businesses that create employment mainly. And small businesses, they pay a lot of taxes compared to huge international companies. And this hasn't been addressed, even by Macron, who was supposed to be a man of the entrepreneurs and that kind of bullshit. So basically, what we have now is that we have a reflex in France where the state is funding fake employment for the youngsters. We had that with François Hollande, Emploi Jeune. So basically, our taxes are paying jobs, fake jobs, because if our taxes don't fund this job, they don't exist no more. The problem is that the economy is in such not a bad shape, but it's not great, that you don't have enough employment for the people. And the small companies are paying too much taxes compared to the big companies. And these taxes are just used to help some sectors and help fund some fake jobs or jobs in the private sectors. While a lot of taxes are paying also the public sectors, where we have a lot of civil servants in France, even if Bruno Le Maire will try to find ways of minimizing the spendings, and it will be less public services, which is not a good solution either. So the only solution would be to have a thriving economy, to make sure that we don't make stupid decisions like the one we made with sanctions and other things like that. But so far, I can't see any reason or any intelligence in the different choices made by a government from the past, would say, 15 years.